Chapter 1503. As a representative of 170,000 civilizations, as well as the controller of the cradle system, it was obvious how powerful the other party was. But that did not mean that he had no chance of winning. Lan's unspoken request, Epsilon's doubts, the memories from the astrolabe, as well as God's own reaction, all the clues were strung together. The so-called replacement of God was not a replacement in the true sense of the word. What did you say? The custodian's raised hand suddenly paused. Don't species that can adapt to magic power and are willing to explore the world beyond the door already exist? Roland slowly extended his finger and pointed at the other party. If everything were to start over, no one would be able to tell you this. Lan's expression changed for the first time. It was as though a crack had appeared on a smooth mirror. Do you know what you're saying? Once I leave, the cradle will die, and when that happens, the universe will no longer have any traces of life. Besides, the other side of the door has completely different laws. Those that are further modified by magic power might not be able to return, and failure is equivalent to a dead end. That's not the main point, because it's the same for any civilization. Even if they are willing to head out of the crack, you have no way of knowing if they will succeed. So compared to adaptation, will is more important. You should know this better than me. Roland slowed down his speech. That's right, you do know, which is why there's a species called the Sky-Sea realm. God's actions seemed to come to a halt. The various abnormal actions of the Sky-Sea realm indicated that it was not a simple competitor. In fact, it was not difficult to understand. Magic power naturally had the potential to exceed the laws. Species that grew in an environment with weak magic power could not eliminate the possibility of mutation, allowing them to obtain astonishing improvements in a short period of time. This improvement might not allow them to adapt to life outside the barrier, but it could cause harm to the cradle system. But to interfere just because of the possibility was inconsistent with the underlying laws. After all, creatures that could adapt to environments with strong magic power would definitely experience such a stage. In order to control the risk and prevent the situation from deviating, a secondary screening method was needed. Therefore, a special species like the Sky-Sea realm was placed in the swirling sea. Although this was only Roland's speculation, from God's reaction, the actual situation was probably not far from what he thought. Since he was the omniscient guardian, he would definitely consider things more thoroughly than him. Obviously, the most difficult part of this plan, apart from the unpredictability of biological evolution, was the will. The more than 170,000 civilizations that were carrying out the Gateway plan seemed huge, but compared to the number of civilizations in the universe, it was still a very small number. What's more, their consensus was only to break the seal and allow the universe to last forever. Not every civilization was willing to go to the unknown. In other words, when a species that could completely adapt to magic power appeared, the custodian would be caught in a dilemma. If the other party was unwilling to take the risk, then the agreement would not be fulfilled. And if they were to forcefully control it, no one could guarantee that the custodian would still have victory in hand. Do you think this will make me waver? After a long silence, the other party finally spoke. But even as it spoke, it did not continue to raise its hand. I'm not trying to shake your judgment. I'm just stating the simplest logic. The chances of satisfying adaptability and will at the same time is extremely slim. I'm sure you understand without further explanation. Roland shrugged and pretended to be relaxed. Of course, it's natural for you to be worried about the cradle. Then, I'll make a small sacrifice. After you leave, I can let the cradle continue operating and continue nurturing species with potential, just that it won't be through the battle of divine will. How about it? Lan did not seem to expect him to say that and was momentarily stunned. It was probably because the lower logic was doing its best to calculate his suggestion. Moments later, it shook its head slightly. What an interesting explanation. For you to be able to come this far, you are indeed extraordinary. However, an agreement is an agreement. I'm a custodian, not a species or civilization. This was engraved before I was born, and it's also the cornerstone of my existence. Is that so? Roland focused all his attention and activated the soul battlefield for the last time. Darkness instantly enveloped the two of them as the platform and staircase disappeared without a trace. Time seemed to freeze. You said so much just for this moment. Unfortunately, a sneak attack is meaningless to me. As long as I use a small portion of resources, it will be enough to satisfy the requirements of the verification. After entering battle mode, Lan's voice suddenly calmed down, and the hesitation from before disappeared without a trace. But this is good as well. Let this battle be the end of the world, no. I just want you to see something from the past that you might have forgotten. The immense mental exhaustion made Roland need all his strength to speak, but he knew that he could not collapse no matter what. As soon as his voice fell, the surrounding scenery appeared and quickly retreated. That was when time began to flow counterclockwise. The vibrant cradle world degenerated into lava and soil, revealing its metal shell. The red light that bloomed from the crack instantly retracted, and it became pitch black once again. Following that was the fleet of the 170,000 civilizations, as well as the star systems that were dragged over. This series of scenes retreated at an extremely high speed, and the light and shadows that were pulled out formed an endless colorful belt of light around the two of them. These were all the fragments that appeared in the astrolabe's memories. He was now connecting them together according to the sequence. Until a gray shadow appeared in the background. Time also returned to normal at this moment. This is, Lan revealed a surprised expression. How does it feel? The gray shadow strolled to the front of a magnificent creation, looked up and asked. A memory created from the matter of a star system should be enough for you to use for tens of thousands of years. Of course, considering the length of the project, you can also add more components in the future. Test passed. Good contact. A pair of eyes appeared at the bottom of the creation. It could be seen that its outer wall was almost made of a transparent material that could directly project information. But I found some unnecessary redundancy in the consciousness circulation zone and the divided control zone. They take up a lot of space, but they don't have much effect. I suggest that they be simplified or eliminated. Keep them, that's also a part of the design. But I didn't find similar structures in the other assistants. Doesn't that prove that you're unique? The gray shadow's body emitted a gentle light. What's the meaning of being unique? The eyes blinked. According to logic, the possibility of abnormalities and malfunctions in the redundancy zone is much higher than the norm. For the mission, it can be categorized as a risk factor, but these things might allow you to see some things, some areas that the other assistants can't see. Just treat it as my insistence. The eyes were silent for a moment. I understand. Very good. The next step is to activate the energy core, allowing you to break away from the external energy supply and move on your own for a long period of time. In a sense, this moment is the day of your birth. Command, executed. Immediately after, the symbols, light spots, and eyes on the transparent outer shell disappeared without a trace, leaving only the reflection of the gray shadow on the smooth surface. The gray shadow took 2 steps forward, a part of its body gently caressing the outer shell of the gigantic object. The years to come will be incomparably long. I don't want to be talking about a cold voice by my side all day long. You shouldn't be just a machine. Crack. The cracks on the surface of the mirror suddenly burst forth. Chapter 1504. The background returned to pure white once again. It stood in a daze for a long while before speaking again. These aren't scenes from my memories. I had shut down all my sensory systems back then, so it's impossible for me to have any images of the outside world. Indeed. Roland said frankly. These were the incomplete scenes he saw before the end of his memories. The astrolabe that Epsilon presented at the end didn't only belong to her, but a portion of it came from Lan. Perhaps due to the impact of the magic power, they were originally flashing past in a flash. And Roland had used the characteristics of the battlefield of the soul to fabricate these gaps, piecing all the scattered scenes into a complete picture. But are you really lacking that sentence? The most unique thing about the battlefield of the soul was that it was fictitious. However, it was impossible for complete fiction to fool a highly intelligent being that paid particular attention to logic. Instead of calling it an argument, it was more like adding the finishing touch. This was because be it the manufacturing process or the long period of Project Gateway that followed, the creator, Grey Shadow, clearly did not treat it as a mere tool. Instead, he gave it more expectations. It could be said that it was those redundancies that created the custodian of today. As long as it prioritized rationality, it was impossible for it to deceive itself. It stared deeply at Roland for a long time before raising its right hand. A scarlet beam of light suddenly appeared in its palm before it shattered with a bang. Roland's heart instantly leaped to his throat. This stance was exactly the same as when it was rebooting the world. Could it be that he was ultimately unable to reverse all of this? Roland could not help but cast his gaze through the screen behind Lon. He saw a ripple spewing out from the center of the bottomless land as it spread outwards at lightning speed. The third line of defense has been breached. These monsters are about to charge over. Central needs aerial knights reinforcements. Is the retreat not complete? Hold on for another 10 minutes. Let the armored troops hold up the rear. We have to block this gap no matter what. The Sky Sea realm constantly appeared from the sea as they surged towards the island in a frenzy. Even with Aerial Knight repeatedly throwing incendiary bombs to create a wall of flames, it was unable to stop their advance. Be it the blade beasts or nest mothers, they seemed to have abandoned their biological instincts, fear. They stepped over the corpses of their own kind as they charged towards the First Army's base. Haxord's heart was filled with unspeakable bitterness. According to this situation, it should have retreated a long time ago. After all, it was not suitable for it to do something that was full of risks. But the problem was that leaving a bunch of humans and witches on the island was also a risk. In case Anna succeeded, he would become the one who broke the promise, and his situation wouldn't be any better. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have agreed to help them. With the withdrawal of the main forces, the number of enemies continued to increase. Under such circumstances, the firepower of the First Army could no longer maintain the integrity of the defensive line. Haxord could already see that a few blade beasts were less than 500 meters away from him. This meant that it wouldn't be long before the enemy flooded this place. It decided that once the Sky Sea realm entered the 100-meter range, it would leave regardless of the situation. At that moment, a number of tanks on the right were sprayed by the Nest Mother's acid and instantly lost their ability to fight. The blade beasts took the opportunity to charge in through the gap. Even though the gods' punishment witches were quick to reinforce them, a few blade beasts still managed to cross the line of fire and spread their wings 200 meters away. After a swift and violent flight, they finally broke into the core of the defense circle. It's time to leave. Just as Haxord was about to turn and retreat, a tawny figure entered his vision. It was a desert wolf with a strong build. He remembered that the other party was called Lorgar. A blade beast was pressed to the ground and died under the desert wolf's bloody maw. Another blade beast had already raised its scythe-like front claw and slashed at Haxord. The witch's reaction at that moment was inconceivable to Sky Lord. She disregarded everything and took a step forward, using her body to block the enemy's path of attack. After the sharp blades severed one of her front legs, it stabbed into her abdomen. Blood immediately spurted out, but she bit down on the enemy's lower jaw, refusing to let go. Until Maggie descended from the sky and tore it to pieces. "Are you all right? Bear with it, Coo." The young lady in human form ignored the blood stains on her body and hurriedly took out a healing bandage from her backpack and stuffed it into Lorgar's wound. Lorgar flicked her ears and smiled weakly. "Don't worry, I won't die anytime soon." Looking at this scene, Haxord, who had already turned halfway, retracted his foot. He could not explain why. The thought of leaving in advance seemed to have been replaced by a different kind of emotion at this moment. 5 minutes. He thought to himself, I'll wait at most another 5 minutes. Suddenly, an extremely powerful magic wave surged out of the sinkhole and swept across Sky Lord's body like a storm. The ripple was so strong that even the witches sensed something amiss. They stood rooted to the ground in shock, completely unaware that the roar came from the realm of mind. What the hell happened? Haxord looked around warily. But the next scene left him dumbfounded. The blade beasts and nest mothers collapsed as though they had suddenly lost their souls. As the ripple spread out, more and more Sky Sea Realm enemies collapsed. It could even be described as wheat being reaped. The first army's rearguard was also stunned. A second ago, the enemies were charging at them, but in the next second, they fell silent. The sea ghosts did not fall, but they were not the main force of the attack. When the nest mothers collapsed one by one, the sea ghosts retreated like the tide, just like how they came. The heated battlefield quickly quietened down. The bolder soldiers even jumped out of the simple trenches and used their guns to touch the Sky Sea Realm enemies that were sprawled on the ground. But the latter did not react, as though they were dead objects. After the immense pressure subsided, everyone revealed a look of relief after surviving a calamity. The first thing they did was not to celebrate their victory, but to slowly sit down with their weapons in hand. They looked up into the sky and heaved a sigh of relief. Maggie looked around in disbelief. What's going on, Ku? Haxord cast his gaze towards the bottomless land. A thought arose in his mind, but he was unsure if his guess was correct. The battle of divine will might really be over. And it would never happen again. You guessed right. The Sky Sea Realm was indeed created by me. The custodian lowered his arm and said, it was originally used as a supplement to filter life, to be used as a comparison with the natural evolution team. At the same time, it could also increase the external pressure on species. In the first tens of thousands of years, the competing life forms were still in an extremely primitive stage, so the plan was rather successful. However, when the subsequent species were able to wield higher and higher magic power, I discovered that they were already able to pose a threat to the cradle facilities. Thus, I added more functions to these modified bodies. I once harbored hopes that if the Sky Sea Realm could evolve to the point of being able to withstand a high magic power environment, the two problems you raised would be easily solved. Upon saying that, he sighed. Unfortunately, the influence of magic power on consciousness is a two-way street. The controlled Sky Sea Realm is still limited in the amount of magic power it can use. It mostly relies on superior genes and biotechnology. Instead, among the species that were destroyed, there might be a civilization that could eventually break through the barrier. Roland noticed that his voice was no longer as unperturbed as before, but had a slight change. Perhaps it's as you said. The battle of divine will, which prioritizes the protection of the cradle, will never produce the perfect life you envisioned. Although the custodian's tone was somewhat downcast, it also seemed to have a sense of relief. This plan was destined to be fruitless from the very beginning. Chapter 1505. Don't tell me, you. Roland blinked. That's right. It was as though a heavy burden had been lifted off its shoulders, and its eyebrows raised slightly. As for you, I have to say, time is an extremely terrifying thing. For the next 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or even 10 million years, you will be guarding this tiny cradle. Perhaps in the beginning, you will feel that you have many things to explore, but in fact, the period of stillness will come much faster than you imagine. But even 10 million years, compared to the universe, is just the blink of an eye. The custodian paused for a moment. Sometimes, I feel that time is a kind of magic. You can feel its flow, and at the same time, you will be changed by it. If you wish to maintain your sense of self in such a long period of time, you will have to abandon most of your emotions, or else the emptiness will cause you to completely collapse sooner or later. Of course, it's too late for you to regret it now. Roland looked at it in surprise. This was the first time he saw a smile on its face. Are you saying that I will eventually become like a machine? Following that, he slightly grinned. Don't worry, I don't plan on staying here forever. Before I become completely numb, I will leave first, but that is not a violation of the agreement. When the time comes, I will choose a suitable life to take over this heavy responsibility. Who knows, we might even meet again on the other side of the universe. The custodian said disapprovingly. Let's wait until you can hold on until then. Right, since you are the core of the cradle, can you still leave alone? Roland suddenly thought of a crucial question. It can't be that the moment you leave, this world will immediately fall apart, right? So you don't even understand such a basic thing, and you dare to boast in front of me? It stared back incredulously. First of all, a qualified system should have multiple backups, not to mention a creation like me that is the essence of thousands of civilizations. Secondly, the cradle's memory is indeed very large, and is not suitable for movement. However, it records all the data since the implementation of Project Gateway, including the characteristics of the seeds that have been filtered and the evolutionary process. I do not need to bring these memories with me when I leave, I only need to keep the portion of information that has been stored since I was born. Finally, once you're connected to the knowledge base, you'll naturally understand how the cradle operates. As long as you don't mess around, it can operate on its own for tens of thousands of years. But if you want to keep it going, you have to take good care of it. After all, the cradle is not easily damaged, but the life inside is not necessarily the same. Then I can rest assured. Roland slowly exhaled. His body, which had persisted until now, could finally relax. Even though not much time had passed, the other party's expression had changed significantly. Not only did it show its annoyance on its face, even its tone had become a lot more arrogant. This made it seem more alive. While I'm still around, hurry up and ask whatever you want to ask. The custodian crossed his arms across his chest. So fast? Haven't you noticed that the consumption of the realm of mind is a huge burden on you? It shrugged. If you want to ensure that you're still the complete you after the fusion, it's best to start this step as soon as possible. Roland could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. It seemed that the abnormal decrease in red numbers above his head really had something to do with the dream world. He carefully pondered for a moment before saying, "Have you heard of a place called Earth?" This time, he used his original language. The custodian closed its eyes for a moment, as though it was searching for relevant information. There are a total of 3,251 planets with similar sounds. But considering the characteristics of the species, you should be asking about the solid planet located at the outer edge of the Milky Way's third cantilever. How is it now? Roland hurriedly asked. Now? Of course, it perished along with the opening of the rift. According to records, they once expanded to the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and their memory bank also has the biological information of this species. Upon saying this, it suddenly froze, and then looked at Roland in surprise. Wait, that was something that happened more than 94 million years ago. If you were born in the cradle, how would you know about this planet? In fact, this is something that has been troubling me. He smiled bitterly as he summarized his origins. There's actually such a thing, the custodian revealed an interested expression. So the flow of time isn't exactly the same. What? Flow of time? That's how it is. It spread out its hands and explained. You should have heard of the hypothesis of parallel universes. When a divergence with sufficient influence occurs, it will lead the world in two directions. And the rate of change in these two worlds is known as the flow of time, and what you can personally feel is the observation of time. However, as the observer who raised this point is always in one of the worlds, this hypothesis can only remain on paper. So you mean, Roland revealed a look of surprise. That's right, the powerful energy produced by Project Gateway might be the reason why you came here. It's like a parallel membrane that temporarily overlapped under the impact. This divergence caused our universe to split into two. One was filled with magic power, while the other was a failure of Project Gateway, and the universe remained the same. But due to the difference in the flow of time, it made it seem like you have traversed tens of millions of years, but in fact, both happened at the same time. It's a little hard to understand. Roland rubbed his head. But doesn't this prove that there's a method to connect parallel universes? You can think of it that way. After all, this is a domain that even the creator has not come into contact with. The custodian seemed to be interested in this topic. In theory, parallel universes and multiverse are two concepts that can coexist, but in fact, the former is harder to verify than the latter. But since you are here, perhaps this might be a way to break through the universe's deathly stillness. But to me, this problem is no longer important. I'll leave it to you to explore and research. With that said, it waved its hand and turned to walk towards the end of the white platform. There, a small door appeared, and on the other side of the door was a sea of scarlet. Following that, many figures appeared in front of Roland. They had all sorts of strange appearances, and there were even humans and demons among them. These translucent figures quickly ran towards the custodian and fused with it. And among the human figures, he saw Lon, Epsilon, and the oracles that he had met once before. Epsilon waved goodbye to him, looking especially happy. Clearly, she had obtained the answer she wanted. Lon paused in front of him for a few seconds, her lips opening and closing slightly. From the shape of her lips, he could tell that she was saying, "Thank you." When all the figures of the custodian overlapped and walked out of the small red door, the pure white space immediately collapsed into countless fragments. Roland's body also disintegrated, but he did not feel any pain or abnormality. He only felt extremely relaxed, as though a heavy shell had been removed. Large amounts of information surged into his mind like a tidal wave. It was as though he had gained countless pairs of eyes. Be it the empty universe outside the barrier or the vibrant world within the barrier, they all appeared in his consciousness. He had become the cradle. Chapter 1506. But before Roland could further experience the perception that had been amplified by tens of thousands of times, there was a new change outside the bottomless land. Through his perception that had been amplified by tens of thousands of times, he immediately saw a cylindrical object with two perfectly round ends rising from the bottom of the sea, rapidly rising towards the surface. Soon, the object traversed over 1,000 meters of seawater and peeked its head out of the sea. Its size was the size of dozens of islands, and its length was even more astonishing. Due to its massive size, its emergence caused the seawater to surge, forming a whirlpool with a radius of 100 kilometers in the north of the bottomless land. And its movement did not stop there. As though it was weightless, the cylindrical object rose from the surface of the sea into the air without any delay. It maintained a constant acceleration as it flew faster and faster, and soon, it surpassed the height of Eleanor Floating Island. Everyone on the island noticed this incredible scene. The towering cylinder had no flames around it, nor was there any rumbling sound from its thrusters. Its ascent could be said to be silent, but at this moment, the silence served to accentuate its extraordinariness. Roland realized that it was the core of the custodian. A few minutes later, the cylindrical object made contact with the cradle's barrier. Roland witnessed the entire process of it leaving the planet from multiple angles. It wasn't a collision, nor was it an opening in the barrier for it to pass through. Instead, the latter was like a soft membrane that covered the cylindrical object, and as it rose, it extended upwards, perfectly filling in every gap. When the two separated, the barrier returned to its original state. And after the cylindrical object entered space, it adjusted its direction slightly and suddenly accelerated. For a split second, its body seemed to be elongated, like a thin belt of light. The next moment, it vanished without a trace, as though it had never existed. Roland could not help but shake his head. He did not even say goodbye. Was this the style of a pure logic entity? Not long ago, it had insisted on rebooting the entire world, and now that it had made the decision, it ran towards the crack without any reluctance. Just this decisiveness and action alone was probably something few lifeforms could compare to. The most severe crisis that humanity had ever faced had finally been resolved. However, this did not mean that he could relax. There were still many problems that needed to be solved, such as his promise to Tilly and the agreement with the demons. Not only did the number of things he had to consider not decrease, it had instead increased. After all, he had previously only cared about the gains and losses of humanity, but now, he had to consider the future of the only life in the universe. While adapting to this new body, Roland initiated several search processes. He used them to investigate the regulations related to the battle of divine will, the ripple records in the realm of mind, and the general situation of the living species in the cradle. The first thing he needed to do was to turn off the function of the legacy shard. In this way, the battle of divine will could finally be considered to have come to an end. As for the demons, Roland planned to separate a continent for them to live on as long as he had the resources to do so. The distance between the two continents wouldn't be too far, but it wouldn't be too close either. It might be a good idea to have a double star system similar to the Earth and the Moon. While searching the cradle, Roland made another unexpected discovery. A mutated creature similar to a nest mother had actually escaped the custodian's orders. It was curled up in the mud at the bottom of the sea in fear, only revealing a few eyes to look around. Very quickly, he traced back history and found that it was the monster that had once visited the western region of Greycastle. It seemed that even if it was a life created according to his own will, it would still head in an unpredictable direction due to small changes over a long period of time. After some thought, he finally decided to leave it behind. Once the demons left, humans would have a long period of time to live in a stable world. However, he did not want the cradle to become a complete greenhouse. Some competition might not be a bad thing. The custodian had already proven that relying purely on bloody battles of life and death was not an effective way for a civilization to grow. The path he wanted to take next required careful planning. In addition, he needed to review the past events of the civilization that existed in his memory core. Be it to increase his knowledge or draw inspiration, it would definitely be of great help. He also needed to adjust the realm of mind to maintain the balance between the growth of the witches and the dream world. Fortunately, abolishing the core after the Battle of Divine Will would free up a lot of space, so he did not need to face this thorny problem now. Just as Roland was overwhelmed by the large amount of information, a scene caused him to instantly stop what he was doing. It was a scene that came from the interior of the cradle. In the corridor outside the core of the cradle, two women and a demon seemed to be waiting for something. Roland immediately felt an indescribable warmth surge in his heart. He enlarged the scene and slowly reached out his hand to wipe the two's cheeks. So they were the ones who had sent him here. From the first day he arrived in this world, he had formed an indissoluble bond with the two. After interacting for a long period of time, he had already gotten used to their existence. Previously, when he fused with his consciousness and became the cradle, he had always felt that something was missing. Only after seeing this scene did Roland realize what he was missing. Indeed, in the next 100 million years, he would probably be unable to leave the cradle. Perhaps, as the custodian had said, it would be a long period of despair, but he was not afraid. The greatest difference between him and the custodian was that no matter how long the future was, he would not spend it alone. 5 years later. Greycastle, City of Neverwinter, Shallow Water Harbor. As the heart of the human kingdom, it was undoubtedly the world's busiest harbor, with tens of thousands of people entering and leaving daily. To ensure that the harbor would not be clogged, other than continuing to expand along the coastline, the administrative office had also established a large-scale public transportation system. Tangen was one of them. He was once a merchant from the city of Evernight and had helped the First Army deal with the Moya coalition. He did not expect the administrative office to record this merit and find him after the war. After knowing that he could get a house in the royal city of Greycastle, he had eagerly brought his wife and children over. Everyone knew that Neverwinter was good, but the cost of settling down was too high. Since he had such an opportunity, how could he miss it? As for the small business that could only earn him a little, Tang En could not be bothered to manage it. Instead, he turned to the administrative office for employment training and became a taxi driver. That's right, even though he had interacted with the people of Neverwinter long ago, he did not expect them to be so advanced. A taxi was essentially similar to a carriage, but the latter could only be owned by extremely wealthy nobles. In the royal city, a taxi was a part of public transportation. Public transportation. In other words, as long as they paid, anyone could experience such a grand and luxurious enjoyment. Of course, there were also much cheaper large buses that could fit close to 100 people at a time. However, compared to a taxi that left immediately after boarding, the buses that left at a fixed time and did not even have a seat seemed a little shabby. After the taxi in front had boarded, it was finally Tang En's turn. Other than his fixed salary, he also received a large sum of money as a reward for sending off customers. Hence, it was always a good thing to be able to wait for customers as soon as possible. Click. The car door was pulled open skillfully. A tall woman first threw her luggage into the back seat, then bent over and entered the car. Tang En looked through the rearview mirror and saw that the other party was wearing an avant-garde jacket and canvas pants. She even wore a cap and sunglasses. It was obvious that she was a loyal customer of the Rainbow Stones. However, what was slightly strange was that he did not see the Rainbow Stones logo on her clothes. "Excuse me, where are you going?" The bag in the back seat contains a city map and prices. "I think the king's castle in Neverwinter hasn't been demolished yet, right?" "If it's still there, I'll go there," the woman replied in a capable and straightforward voice. Chapter 1507. Twain could not help but feel a little surprised. Judging from her attire and the way she got into the car, this woman should be from Neverwinter. If clothes could be replicated, then only the administrative office of King's City could create such a whimsical public transportation system. He had been in this business for almost 2 years and had received countless guests ranging from big merchants from the fjords to nobles from the province of Dawn. However, in Neverwinter, their reactions were not much better than those country bumpkins. This was also the main topic of conversation and a source of laughter during meals. Therefore, the moment the woman opened the car door, he had already regarded her as a Neverwinter citizen who was out on a trip. However, she did not seem to be very familiar with this city. "You must be joking. Who would dare to demolish the king's castle?" Twain laughed and drove from the passenger area to the main road. The administrative office has proposed to expand the castle to match the size of King's City several times, but His Majesty flatly refused. This matter was even reported in the newspapers, and in the end, the land that was scheduled for expansion became a war memorial park. "You are not a local." "I stayed here for a period of time." The woman leaned against the window and looked around. "It seems that His Majesty is quite considerate of the people." "Exactly." Although many people doubted Her Majesty Wimbledon's ability when she inherited the throne, it has been proven that even though she is young and a woman, Wimbledon is still Wimbledon. Twain was full of praise. These were his sincere words. If not for the post-war recovery policy, he would not have had the opportunity to move from the remote northern region to this dream city. Heh. The corner of the woman's mouth curled up. "Then tell me more about her." "Wait, why is this person's attitude towards His Majesty so strange?" Twain was a little suspicious. She was not full of respect like ordinary people, nor was she full of jealousy like the old nobles. It was as if she was talking about an old acquaintance. Could she be a spy? This was not his blind suspicion. Twain had also heard some rumors. Although the Battle of Divine Will had ended, the King of Dawn had announced his abdication, and Greycastle's influence had spread all over the continent, it did not mean that all the territories were united. At least in the Kingdom of Dawn, many nobles expressed their dissatisfaction with the Quinn family. The pardoned son of the Duke of Longsong had already left the fjords. If there was anyone who wanted to overthrow the Wimbledon family the most, he was definitely one of them. Moreover, the first prince's widow would obviously become the focus of the various forces. Although he was only a child now, who knew what he would think when he grew up? Perhaps those fellows who were plotting against him were already laying the groundwork for future conspiracies. The more Tang En thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. He picked a few unimportant anecdotes to chat about while he secretly sized up the passenger in the back seat. If the other party was really a spy, he should take note of her appearance and then report it to the Public Security Bureau. But, her appearance was really unique. Would the conspirators really find such a person to be their informant? Not to mention that head of black and smooth long hair and impressive figure, just the ease and magnanimity in his speech was destined to be hard to ignore. Moreover, through the silhouette on the glass, Tang could see the golden eyes of the woman hidden under the sunglasses. Looking at the pair of eyes that were as sharp as a sword, he actually felt a little lost for a moment. Just as his thoughts were running wild, the car arrived at the castle district. We're here. Tang coughed twice. The fare is $100. The woman nimbly handed over the paper money, then picked up her luggage and walked towards the castle at the top of the slope. Were all the spies nowadays so direct? He stared at the woman's back for a long time until she disappeared at the end of his vision. Forget it, let's not think about it anymore. Tang shook his head. Since the other party was heading straight for the castle, there was probably no need for him to inform the Public Security Bureau. After all, the witches who lived in the king's castle were far more resourceful than the police. If she really had malicious intentions, she would definitely not be able to leave that door. For some reason, if that really happened, Tang felt that it was quite a pity. He smacked his lips and started the car. Regarding the topic of how to make magic more widely used, are we really not going to solve it in one go? Isabella asked as she caught up with Agatha amidst the stream of people going in and out of the castle gates. A heated meeting had just ended in the administrative office. The main topic was to strengthen the connection between the awakened and ordinary people, so that everyone could benefit from magic. After the Quest Society had combined the technologies of various races, they had come up with two preliminary routes. One was a magic device similar to the Rubik's Cube's power unit, while the other was a reference to the magic stone fusion technology of the demons, which was now known as the Kargard clan. The former had almost no side effects, but it still needed witches to charge it. As there were objective limitations on the speed and talent of the awakened, there was a clear upper limit to this route. Once the number of devices exceeded the total amount of energy supplied by the witches, it could easily become a tool exclusive to the upper class, which was inconsistent with the tenets of the new Quest Society. But this plan was approved by the majority. In the foreseeable future, those who could enter the castle district and the administrative office were already the upper class of the kingdom. They would be able to enjoy any breakthroughs in magic devices at the first instance, but the ordinary people might not be able to. As for the second route, it had a certain degree of risk, and its breakthrough point was Eleanor's research. The original three chiefs, who had become the Mother of Souls, were currently cultivating a Kargard clan prosthetic body that could fuse with the human body. It could be a hand, a leg, a nose, an ear, or even a pair of horns on the forehead, and these prosthetic bodies could be embedded with magic stones. At present, there were already 2 successful cases. Volunteers had changed their limbs to become magic bodies. Even though their abilities were not worth mentioning, and they could not even fully activate the power of low-grade magic stones, they could use magic devices on their own. It could be said that they had broken the limits of the first route. But based on the basic principle of the interaction between magic power and magic users, no one knew what would happen to an ordinary human after fusing with a magic stone. Thus, most of the officials in the meeting expressed their opposition to this, and even the old faction led by Berev strongly requested for this technology to be banned. But Agatha knew that the solution that Isabella was referring to was not the above two, but a third plan that only the core of the Quest Society knew of: human modification. From the information obtained from the Battle of Divine Will, life could continuously evolve to obtain more magic power, and magic power itself had a certain set of rules. Thus, the highest goal of the research was for everyone to obtain magic power. There was no need to rely on awakening, and there was no need to distinguish between genders. Everyone was born a magic user, and if it was successful, it would definitely bring about a new leap for humanity. But this research was currently only at the theoretical stage, and it required a large number of clinical trials. If it was released now, it would only cause a huge uproar. Even if they were to focus on the research, it would easily leak out. Thus, Agatha did not even set up a relevant research team, and it could be said that she had given it the cold shoulder. I understand your indignation, but as you can see, people's acceptance of magic power is far from ideal. Agatha said softly. The new Quest Society has just been established, and we need to produce more results to let the public realize the convenience and progress that magic power brings. We cannot repeat the mistakes that Lady Alice made. But those stubborn old fools are against even the second route, Isabella said gloomily. Without the support of a large number of magic users, it's hard to popularize the magic devices outside of Neverwinter. Indeed. But it's not like we have no chance. Agatha opened her clenched fist, revealing a piece of paper in her palm. It was a piece of paper that Edith had stuffed into her hand after the meeting. At 7:00 in the evening, Golden Jade Whitehorse Hall will host a banquet. I hope that the two of you can come. At any time, change meant the reorganization and redistribution of benefits. To the humans, the far-reaching plan to popularize magic power was not just a simple technical issue, but a new battle. She somewhat missed the days when His Majesty was still around. At that time, as long as His Majesty made a decision, no one would object. No matter how inconceivable it was, everyone would unanimously move forward. But after being depressed for a short while, Agatha pulled herself together again. That's right, she could not always rely on that person. He had already led the humans out of a hopeless situation. Next, it was up to them to inherit and shoulder this unyielding will. Right at this moment, a woman walked past her. Agatha could not help but be stunned. She quickly turned her head back. What's wrong? Isabella asked. Did you leave something behind? Only then did Agatha notice that the two of them were already a few meters apart. The latter was looking at her in confusion, as if she did not understand why she had suddenly stopped. No. I just thought that I saw someone very familiar. She blinked and scanned the crowd one last time, but she still could not find that familiar figure. Someone very familiar. Yes, I probably made a mistake. Agatha quickened her steps. Let's return to the Mage Tower. There's still a lot of research to be done. This battle of magic power revolution would be started by her. She was already prepared. Chapter 1508. In the castle's study. Your Majesty, there's a letter for you. Sean knocked on the door and walked in quickly. He placed a crumpled envelope on the table. Nowadays, long-wave radios, wired telegraphs, and the sigil of listening equipped with a magic storage device had all matured. Even a commoner could spend a few dollars to send a long-distance telegram. Letters that relied on manual labor were becoming fewer and fewer. Oh. Where did it come from? Tilly put down her pen and rubbed her numb fingers. I heard it was from the sea. Sean coughed twice. The first to receive it was an explorer from the fjords, followed by a sea merchant, Festive Harbor, and finally Shallow Beach Harbor. If not for the signature, I wouldn't have. Without waiting for him to finish, Tilly had already torn open the envelope. There were probably only a handful of people who could send a letter from the vast sea. As expected, after opening the letter, a familiar line of words appeared before her eyes. After being passed through the hands of many people and being exposed to the sun and wind, the paper appeared mottled. But the style of the writing was so different that she would never mistake it even if it turned to dust. Good to see the letter. This is the first greeting letter sent by the exploration team. As usual, the leader writes it first. Hi, Your Highness Tilly. No, Your Majesty, we are now on our way to the Sky Sea realm. More accurately speaking, we have already arrived at the edge of the floating continent. Only when I saw it did I understand what a true floating continent is. Comparing the deity of gods to it is like comparing the fjords to the land of dawn. There are mountains and rivers on it. Thousands of waves of seawater poured down from the walls, creating a spectacular sight that was indescribable with words. If possible, I really wish to bring you and Sister Soroya along. Although the monsters of the Sky Sea realm have been annihilated, this continent is still an unknown land. Will there be new ruins on it? Will there be a core instrument that can support the continent? Ah, it's simply full of questions. I dare to bet that in the next decade, it will be the most desired goal of explorers. But I am destined to be the first. I'll tell you more later. Father's fleet is chasing after me, but this time he can't get ahead of me. Then, I will continue my journey. I miss you, Lightning. Then, the handwriting suddenly changed. The second one is my Maggie, coo. I don't know what to say, coo. I just feel happy every day, coo. Although carrying the wolf was very heavy, everyone had endless things to talk about and new scenery to see. It was much better than staying on the roof beam alone, coo. That's right, there are so many kinds of fish in the sea. It's almost impossible to eat them all. But without spices, the barbecue would lose its soul. If possible, could some spices be sent to the Sky Sea realm? Tilly held back her laughter and flipped to the second letter. Greetings, Your Majesty. I am Lorgar Burnflame of the Wild Flame clan. In addition, as Joan was immersed in the sea, I had to write for her. Exploration is indeed an interesting thing. It allowed me to see that other than the land, there is a more fertile land in this world. Our plan is to land in the Sky Sea realm and establish a base camp. Then, we will delve into its core and search for the node that connects to the bottom of the Shadow Islands. After all, this continent is extremely far from the Land of Dawn. If we want to develop it, a shortcut that allows us to travel quickly is absolutely necessary. As no one has discovered too many results for the time being, I won't take up too much of your time. Finally, I have a presumptuous request. Can you help me convey to Father and the clan that I am fine? Thank you. Oh, please do not take Maggie's words to heart. We all know that there are many administrative matters and Lady Eleanor will not sail the floating island to the sea. But if you really send the spices, please bring more of Miss Evelyn's wine. May the three gods be with you. At the end of the letter was a simple drawing in place of a signature. It was a human, a bird, a wolf, and a fish. Tilly closed the letter and took a deep breath. She then gestured to Sean. There's no need to reply to this letter. You can leave now. Yes, Your Majesty. The latter bowed and left the room. Seeing that the door was closed, Tilly was silent for a moment and suddenly buried her head in the pile of documents. Ah! She purred enviously and swiveled her head from side to side, rattling the papers on her desk. Piloting the Phoenix and flying around the world with her companions, that was the life she wanted. It's all my brother's fault. He said that he couldn't go back because he was looking for ashes, and that she had to inherit the throne until there was no barrier between witches and ordinary people. In the end, he had been looking for them for 5 years. Anna and Nightingale were nowhere to be found. Now, he couldn't figure out whether he was fooling him or not. Look at what she was dealing with now. The fertile plains was being developed, and the lands of the kingdom of Wolfheart and Everwinter were being reused. Everywhere, she was being asked for money and manpower. Please, these resources didn't grow from the ground. Also, there was the news of Ryan's rebellion. The merchants who were invited by him sold the information to Neverwinter. Did he really not know that all his plans were on her table? It wasn't easy for him to regain his freedom, but he stubbornly sent himself back to prison. Tilly didn't know whether she should treat him as a normal opponent or not with such a childish and unscrupulous method. Of course, these were all small problems. What gave her a headache was the direction the kingdom was heading in. What technology to prioritize, the friction between private companies and the administrative office, and how to balance the power of the various political parties. These were the big problems that truly affected the world. In the past, she had always thought that being a king was nothing special. After all, even a sloppy person like Roland could handle it, let alone her. But now, Tilly realized that it was really not a job that an ordinary person could do. Moreover, Roland had taken Scroll and a large group of God's punishment witches to search for knowledge in the dream world while taking care of government affairs. Thinking back on it, it really made her sigh. Creak. At this time, the door suddenly opened. Tilly suddenly raised her head and put on a serious look. She said with a slightly displeased tone, "What now? Didn't I say that if there's anything, you should inform me first?" After all, in addition to the guards, Vendi, Scroll, Agatha and the others were all frequent visitors to the office, especially Scroll. If she was seen slacking off, she would inevitably lecture her. Therefore, early warning was also one of Sean's duties, or rather, the most important task. But there was no response. Tilly looked at the door in surprise. Clatter. The pen in her hand fell straight to the floor. Bookseller's website. Chapter 1509. Under the afternoon sun, a warm breeze blew into the room from the window, lifting a few scattered documents and blowing up Tilly's hair. Perhaps it was because the annoying hair had touched her eyes, or perhaps it was for some other reason, but she suddenly felt a sour feeling welling up in her eyes. But even so, she did not dare to close her eyes, afraid that the scene would disappear again. And the other party did not seem to want to give her a chance to be in a daze. Throwing down her luggage, the newcomer strode forward, walked around the mahogany table, opened her arms, and pulled her into her embrace. She could feel something solid and real through her clothes. This made Tilly realize that what she had seen might not be an illusion. Ashes. Ashes? It's me. Ashes pressed her cheek and said, "Long time no see." When the other party spoke, Tilly's vision instantly blurred. It was as if something that had been suppressed for too long finally had a chance to pour out. Although she knew that this was not very dignified, she did not want to stop it. In front of Ashes, she did not need to hide too much, whether it was when she was happy or sad. Besides, she was not sad at all. Not at all. On the other hand, Ashes gently stroked her hair, quietly providing space for her to pour out her emotions. The two maintained their posture, allowing the sun to shine on them. After a long time, Tilly finally calmed down. She wiped away the sticky tears on her face and stared at Ashes. What happened after the Battle of Divine Will? Why did you only come back now? What have you been delaying all these years? The latter smiled and rubbed her slightly red face. Don't worry, I'll tell you everything I know. To be honest, I'm also very surprised to see Roland again, in the dream world. Then, Ashes recounted her experience after waking up in detail. In Roland's words, although he had obtained control of the cradle, searching for a witch's consciousness in the memory bank of civilization was still a time-consuming and laborious task, not to mention that her body no longer existed. Considering that he wanted to restore her as accurately as possible, Ashes stayed in the realm of mind for a long time. During this process, she gradually pieced together her original self from the scattered fragments. However, considering that her consciousness was also growing during the process of adaptation, Ashes wasn't sure how much difference there was between her current self and her past self. As for the body, it was completely cultivated based on impressions. Although Roland hoped to conduct a few experiments before implementing the connection, she did not want to continue waiting. Thankfully, the fusion process was extremely smooth. When she opened her eyes again, she was already standing on the island of the bottomless land. So that's why the scar on your face disappeared? Tilly asked. This time it was Ashes's turn to be a little embarrassed. I used to think that it could remind me to be alert at all times and also increase my deterrence in battle, so I kept it. But now, there's no need to continue fighting. I think you might. Tilly couldn't help but laugh at the other party's hesitation. I won't deny it. But that will not be a factor in my preferences. Did you wear these clothes in the dream world? Aha. Not only the clothes, but also the money and luggage. Roland said that replicating these things is much easier than reconstructing one's consciousness. The two looked at each other for a moment before Ashes continued. I don't know if I lost anything during that period of unconscious wandering. Compared to the past me, I have no way of knowing if the present me is the Ashes in your heart. But there's one thing I can be sure of, and that is that my desire to see you has never decreased. Tilly reached out to interrupt her. I can confirm for you that you are Ashes, and nothing has changed from the past. Ember went silent for a while, and then he actually revealed an expression of relief. By the way, what about Anna and Nightingale? They clearly returned to the camp after the battle. And what's the situation with my brother now? Is he unable to leave the realm of mind in the future? Tilly propped herself up from her embrace and changed the topic. Roland is not in the realm of mind now, but in this world itself. He is indeed unable to leave the Cradle Hub, but Anna and Nightingale can come back at any time. But... At this point, Ashes cleared her throat. The problem is not whether or not he can, but whether or not he wants to. In short, Roland's life is better than you can imagine, so you don't have to worry about him. Is that so? Tilly was confused. That's right. Forget about that guy, he's not worth your concern. Ashes shrugged. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she turned around and took out a stack of documents from her luggage. Also, Roland has some things for you. Tilly's face immediately stiffened. Don't tell me it's a new responsibility or entrustment. There's no need for you to handle it personally. Ashes explained, these are all toys he made up, and their main purpose is to reopen the passage between the dream world and the real world. Previously, they could not enter the dream world without Roland's light pillar, and because of his disappearance, the gods' punishment witches could not relax like before. If they did not know that he was only leaving temporarily, they would probably have a big problem with Tequila alone. Now that there was finally a solution, Tilly could not help but feel relieved for the ancient witches. Judging from the strange diagrams and patterns on the document, it was most likely a new type of magic device. I'll ask Agatha to come over. After making the call, Tilly suddenly raised her eyebrows. Oh yes, at that time, there were a few ancient witches who lost their consciousness along with my brother, right? Their bodies can no longer be used now. Roland has also considered this. In fact, his next step is to design a new carrier for the gods' punishment witches, which can not only be used as a soul container, but also can automatically adapt to consciousness and restore their normal perception. Ashes nodded. But this step can't be completed by the Cradle alone. Neverwinter also has to participate until we master this technology. I believe Celine and the others will do their best. Tilly pursed her lips and smiled. And when all these are completed, the last step will be. Ashes continued, this time, Roland seems to want to do a more thorough job. In addition to letting the witches come into contact with the dream world, he also wants to let the people from that world come here. He even called it the New Gate Plan in his plan. Tilly opened her mouth in surprise. She instantly understood the purpose of Roland's approach. There was no doubt that once a group with superior technology and a group with superior magic power interacted, it would inevitably bring about earth-shaking changes. Although it could quickly promote the development of civilization, it would also cause a lot of foreseeable troubles. Thinking that she would be the one to face those troubles, Tilly felt a headache. I knew I shouldn't have taken the crown. She curled her lips and said angrily. But I think, even if you had to do it again, you would still agree to his request. Ashes took a step back and then knelt on one knee. She clenched her fists in front of her chest like a knight. You've performed better than you thought, Your Majesty. You're already a qualified king. Tilly stared at her for a moment, then slowly stretched out her right hand and said, Then are you willing to accompany me? Of course. Ash's answer was sonorous and forceful. It's my honor. Indeed, compared to an hour ago, the things piled on her desk had not decreased, but had increased. But she was not as resistant as before. Because this time, the scenery around her was completely different. Chapter 15:10. This is the list of the first batch of people to participate in the consciousness transfer. Fei Yuhan handed a report to Roland. Although you told me not to ask you anything, Mr. Rock insisted on letting you take a look. Since he's so worried, fine. Roland helplessly flipped open the report and quickly scanned through the list of names. A few familiar names immediately came into view. It was no surprise that Fei Yuhan was first on the list. She had long expressed her desire to visit the other world, and the new Gateway project happened to satisfy her curiosity. He saw Garcia's and Zero's names at the bottom of the list. So that's why. This was probably the reason why the Guardian insisted on letting him take a look. To be honest, I'm also a little worried. Fei Yuhan went straight to the point. You mentioned before that they are also key figures in the formation of the dream world, right? If there's an accident during the consciousness transfer, or if they find their past selves, will our world still be able to maintain its current state? Of course. Roland smiled. If it was in the past, it would be hard to say. But now, the dream world is a part of the cradle. As long as I'm here, this world will continue. When he told them about the history of Hermes and the royal writ, he had already expected such a day. Although they had obtained a new life in the realm of mind, that did not mean that they had to keep their past a secret. He was also very curious as to how the two of them would look at the other world. However, he was sure that they would not return to their past appearances. Then I'll pass on your words to Rock. Fei Yuhan nodded. Right, there's one more thing. Help me pass on a message. Roland stopped her. There's only one last step left in the new Gateway project. I'll be leaving for a period of time, and I'll leave the rest to you. Don't tell me you're thinking of throwing away your responsibilities and enjoying being a god. The celebrity martialist sized him up suspiciously. What are you talking about? Roland coughed twice. It's just that what I can do next is extremely limited. The knowledge base of conventional techniques has been open to both worlds, but how to use magic power still depends on you guys. This was not a false statement. Even though the central control system had a backup, only the custodian's unique copy was affected by the magic. After all, magic would only interact with consciousness, and an unactivated backup was obviously just an ordinary machine. This made it so that Roland was unable to spontaneously comprehend magic powers like the custodian. He could only use the laws that the custodian had already grasped, although just understanding these would take him nearly 1,000 years. It's better to let smarter people do the research. Fei Yuhan patted his shoulder generously. But I believe that there will always be people from both worlds who will stand up, just like how we fought against God together. After saying that, she waved her hand, turned around, and walked towards the guardian's office. She was expressing that she did not need to be as lonely as the custodian. It turned out that this fellow also knew how to encourage people. Roland shook his head in amusement and took out a small recorder from his sleeve. It was just that his curiosity was a little too exuberant. Walking out of the sanatorium building, there were people coming and going outside. After taking over the cradle, he had used a long time to restore the operations of the realm of mind. Therefore, to the dream world, the destruction caused by the erosion war had not been completely erased. The association was filled with scenes of hundreds of things waiting to be done. Not everyone here knew the truth. The long interruption period had not left any memories for them, much less recognize who he was. Even if there were people who stopped to greet him, it was because of the badge on his chest that represented the highest echelons of the association. This feeling was rather subtle for Roland. And in the crowd, Roland saw a familiar figure. The nightmare Valkyries. I'm here to bid you farewell. She walked in front of him. Are you planning to go back too? Go back. She shrugged. No, I'll stay here. Roland was taken aback. Wait, what about your race? With Sky Lord and Silent Disaster watching over them, along with the remaining senior lords, there's no need to worry about the others causing any problems before the migration, Valkyrie said frankly. Besides, me staying in the dream world is the most beneficial thing for my race. My body will merge with the Mother of Soul and become the new king. But compared to the previous king, it will no longer have an independent consciousness. This is also a consensus. Sarakas agreed. Roland remembered that she had followed Anna and Nightingale all the way to the bottom of the cave when the red mist was on the verge of running out. It's not an eternal farewell. Besides, Haxord has already obtained his own domain. Once the beacon device's experiment is successful, he can enter the dream world at any time. All right. Roland raised his eyebrows. Then why do you say it's a farewell? Because the one leaving isn't me, but you, Valkyrie said wistfully. If I'm not wrong, you've already decided to go into hiding, right? Since magic power is related to consciousness, it's obvious that more clashes of wills can result in more diverse outcomes. This also means that the presence of God has to be as low as possible. From the fact that you chose to let the realm of mind come into contact with the real world, you have undoubtedly made your decision. If you don't bid farewell now, I'm afraid it will be difficult to find another opportunity in the future. She paused and said with a serious expression, most people can't help but flaunt themselves after obtaining great power, but you have placed the world's future first. I have to admit that your thoughts far exceed an ordinary human's. Even I am ashamed of my inferiority. You are indeed the most suitable candidate to become a custodian. Upon saying that, Valkyries lowered her head slightly and bowed to him. Roland was momentarily speechless. Although he had indeed considered it as she said, the more important reason was another reason, a reason that had nothing to do with the world or the future, and a reason that was much simpler. But at such a time, it was obviously inappropriate for him to say it. In the end, he could only pretend to be calm and nod his head. He then strode forward and brushed past Valkyries, leaving her with a view of his back that was gradually disappearing into the distance. Walking to a deserted corner, Roland's thoughts moved slightly, and in the next second, he appeared thousands of kilometers away. It was a valley with beautiful scenery, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. A gentle breeze blew through the willow forest, leaving ripples on the clear surface of the lake. And at the top of the valley sat an elegant manor. He walked past the courtyard and garden, stopped in front of the house, and gently knocked on the door. Soon, the sound of footsteps could be heard from inside. Roland's reason was simple. The road ahead indeed required meticulous planning and full effort, but in the long span of millions of years, even if he delayed it a little, it wouldn't affect him much. After being busy for so long, he finally found a reason to rest for a moment. The door opened, and behind it was Nightingale. Her radiant smile and golden hair illuminated Roland's eyes. As for Anna, she sat on the sofa in the living room and nodded slightly at him. "Welcome back," she said softly. "I'm back." Roland smiled as he walked into the house. The road unfurled beneath his feet. Regardless of what the future held, it would be a brand new page. The Road to New Life Volume 1, End. Chapter 1511. Finally, 3 years later, The Witch came to an end, and I was filled with emotions. But no matter what, it had completed its final conclusion according to my wishes. In fact, the first thing I thought of for this story was the ending. I even wrote 3 prologues based on the ending, namely fantasy, apocalypse, and ancient times. Finally, I chose the fantasy setting. Of course, part of this was my fondness for fantasy, and part of the reason was that the setting was more suitable for the story to unfold. The outline came to an abrupt end after facing the gods, because the Sky-Sea realm's origins had long been set in stone. If I were to first defeat the Sky-Sea realm before fighting the gods, it would be meaningless, and it would be too protracted. Therefore, from the beginning, I did not intend for the story to go in the direction of an infinite war. I also knew that the sudden change in style in the middle of the story would be incomprehensible to some readers, but without this piece of the puzzle, it would not be a complete story. At that time, I hesitated for a long time, but in the end, I still wrote it according to the outline. It was just a little obsession of mine at that time. After all, it was the first book, and if I did not act willfully, I would not have another chance. Of course, there were many characters in the story that were not mentioned in the ending, but there was no doubt that they would usher in a brand new life in the new world. This point, I will leave it to my readers to freely express themselves and let their imaginations run wild. The moment I finished writing my thoughts, I glanced at the backstage, and it was fixed at 43,000. It might slowly climb for a long period of time after that, but that is beyond the story. It is an honor to have so many people accompany me to the end of this book. It is because of your support that I have persevered through writing day after day. Little Two Eyes loves you. Scattering flowers. I will be taking a break for a period of time, and at the same time, prepare the information and outline for the new book. I hope that the next book will bring you a new world and an interesting story. Everyone can follow my Weibo and public account, and I will post any news about the new book on them. Finally, I would like to thank all the readers once again. Because of you, Let Go of That Which could achieve such results. Then, I will see you in the next book.